Hello everyone, My Mountain Life back again, and finally it's blooming. Finally the trees are blooming. April 25th, 2024. So they were like hanging in this position right here where they're just a ball and you can see the red before it starts to turn white when they put the petals out. And it sat like that for I think 2 weeks, at least a week and a half, if not 2 weeks. So I'm not sure, like, somebody probably knows a lot more than I do, I'm sure they do, about why or how this tree knows and when it decides to actually fully put its blooms out. So it's not fully yet, but right here, they'll probably be out by tomorrow, maybe the next day. This is an early gold European pear tree, and I'm pretty impressed with it as far as the ability to grow in my environment, the ability to bloom, apparently, and it's disease-free from in my area and pest-free. So this is the type of tree that I plant and I don't have to do anything more about it, at least so far. I haven't seen any issues or problems with this particular variety. But how does it taste? What's the texture like? Will it actually fruit? I don't know. I go on the forums. I try to read about early gold, and all I can read is people saying that it grows in really cold environments. So it's a very hardy tree. It's the daughter of the U-R-E tree, pear tree. This is probably not a variety that you're going to see very often, except if you live in the northern climates, and they have them at nurseries. But when I watch other people's videos, when I listen to what they say, this is not a variety anybody talks about. That could be because most of the videos I'm watching and the forums I'm reading are people who are living in Pennsylvania or Tennessee or California, and so maybe that's why. But also it may be that, hey, you got a cold variety pear, good for you, it's going to give you some fruit, good for you. But nobody wants to eat it. Maybe that's what's going to happen. But I told you that I was going to keep an eye on these pears and the plums and talk about the blossoming, when they blossom, and the temperatures during their blossom, and when they start blossoming. So this is the first tree to blossom right here, and the year is about right in there with it. It's going to blossom probably at the same time. This tree is the first one to blossom in my orchards ahead of the Japanese plums, and this is a European pear. And I'm not sure that that's the way it's supposed to happen. I think the Japanese plums in like Tennessee, I think they were blooming in February. And I hope I have an Asian pear left out of the ones that died last year, but I believe I have an Asian pear left, and it's not even close to as long as this one. So why is that? And my belief is that because of the environment I'm in, the temperatures are more condensed, the ranges, it's generally colder, and they move up slower than somebody who might live in Tennessee, for example, who their Asian plums are blooming in February because the days are warm, and then sometimes it drops well below freezing at night. And so they have a very big variation of temperature, while here it seems stuff stays colder longer, and then it kind of ratchets up within this range at a slower pace. That's what I'm thinking. Now, I did check the temperatures on my phone because I'll go into that in just a second, but I did check the temperatures on my phone because the I noticed that it's going to get 30 to 31 degrees sometime next week at night, supposedly. Now, I was worried because it was 19 degrees a few days ago at night, so it dropped below 20 Fahrenheit, obviously, and then I think it was maybe 27 the next night. And so those are some temperatures where if these blooms were out, it could have been, I could have been losing the flowers, right? The frost could have hit them. But this tree held on to those blooms for a week and a half. And I'll show you the condition before I show you the blooms on the tree. Not a whole lot to see, right? This isn't like a magnolia or maybe some of the blossoms that you see on some other people's channels or you've seen pictures of. The cherry blossoms and stuff like that. The leaves haven't popped out, the blossoms came out first. Probably happens, you know it, on a lot of trees. But I have other plums that the leaves are out, but there's no blooms showing. And so I'm wondering, I'm not going to get any blooms maybe. So now let me go and talk about what I was going to say before. So I did some research, and on apples specifically, they have done a lot of studies on when you see the blossoms and the nighttime or the temperatures, the frost temperatures, and when you expect you could lose 10% of your crop, your fruit, and when you can lose 90% of it. And the universities, I'm not sure who started it, but I think Purdue was one of them, and I'm not going to name some of the others, but I think Washington State and maybe some other universities were conducting some research on this subject. And what they found was, I think in apples specifically, if it's 28 degrees, above 28, then you should be okay. But if it drops below 28 degrees for 30 minutes, then you could lose 10% of your blooms, your potential blossoms. If it drops below 24 degrees, and I'm going off of memory on this, so don't quote me, then you could lose 90% of your blossoms. Now, what's interesting though is further on this research, further in, if you read the whole thing instead of just those two things and you keep reading in, they say that you may still have a lot of fruit on your tree, which you're like thinking, well, that doesn't make sense because I'm losing all these blossoms, right? So how am I going to have fruit on my trees? Well, it's almost like they're suggesting that it might be a natural way of thinning your fruit. Now, if you live in a climate where you don't have the frost, you have this problem, or you could have this problem. In fact, I've seen it one time in my orchard, my home orchard, and that is over, there's too many pears or plums or whatever on your trees, and the branches bend way down and they could even break and you could lose them. So they say, well, thin your crop or thin the fruit off your tree. Well, what's interesting is if you lose 10% at a certain temperature and then you lose 90% at another, but yet further on in the research they indicate to you that, hey, you still may have quite a bit of fruit on your tree. It may be a way that nature, maybe a frost is kind of a natural way of thinning the fruit out, potentially. Now, obviously, if you drop way down and for a really long time, you may lose like a ton of your crop due to frost. Maybe you lose it all. And that's maybe what happens when the people that I read in the forums from Tennessee talk about with Asian plums, is that they have a bad experience with them because they could lose everything. It blooms in February, and then they don't get any fruit on the tree that year. And I feel bad for them because Asian plums are pretty cool. They taste really good, really juicy. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about right now. I am waiting for my biggest order of trees to arrive. The last time they arrived at like 7:30 at night, which makes it impossible for me to plant them. Today they're supposed to arrive and they'll probably arrive at 7:30 tonight, which means I won't be planting them today. I will probably plant them tomorrow. I took tomorrow off of work so that I could potentially plant the trees that arrive tonight. I got a couple buckets ready for them, put some water in there, and I should be good to go. I'm also going to let you know that my intention is I'm going to continue on with these observations. I'll report back to you on some sporadic videos on that. But I'm also going to tell you about all the different varieties that I have in this orchard. These orchards, I should say. Some of them I have multiples of. I have 3 early golds, 3 years, for example. I have 5 Toka plums. I have 3 black ice plums. So as I'm trying to explain to you, I do have some multiples of some. But other trees, I only have 1 of. And I will have, at the end of this year, about 120 trees, which is quite a few, but for somebody who has an orchard, they can have 1,000 or 5,000 trees. So it's actually really small to only have 100 trees, only. But my intention is my goal was to get to 150 trees that were producing fruit, that I could go to the farmer's market and then see if people will buy the fruit, right? But I don't know if I'll stop at 150. I may go higher. It just depends on how much room I have and how much work I want to put in to doing that. But for you, because I find this fascinating, I'm going to go over the varieties that I have in another video. Maybe I'll have more details like on one specific variety, which I'll spend maybe just one video on. Like the Toka plum, I'll probably talk a little bit more heavily about. And then some other varieties where I just have kind of a stick with a few branches and a few leaves. I may talk a little bit about them, and I may have actually give you some history of what I know about them. But I am going to do a couple videos where I'm just going to basically go down the European pears and just say, hey, this is an early gold, I have 3 of these, whatever, this is my year, and then this is my summer bloodburn, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to go and go through the orchards and show all of the pear trees, European pear trees I have. And I'll do the same thing with Japanese plums. I'll do the same thing with European plums. I'll do the same thing with the apple trees I have. Although my apple trees are kind of generic, there's not anything that's like rare or that not a lot of people have. But and then I'll go through my cherry trees that I have. And then I will do future videos where I'll specifically talk about one tree. And I'll just do like a 5-minute video on that one variety and what I think of it, what my experience has been with it. So far, the best experience I've had with Asian plums or Asian American hybrid plums is the black ice. Best experience with that tree. But the Toka this year might look pretty good, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. How one of the trees is looking out here in the south orchard that I just planted last year. I did buy it from a local nursery, and it's looking pretty good. So let me go and show you these blossoms closer to show you what I'm talking about. Let's see here. So you can see the blossoms, and I'm going to point with my finger so I can't see very well because of the light behind me. But so this is how all these blossoms look right here for a week and a half to 2 weeks, like that. They sat there like that for a week to 2.5, or a week and a half to 2 weeks. They sat like this, or maybe like this a little bit too. And I was amazed because I thought, oh my gosh, they're gonna bloom, and then when they bloom, they're gonna get hit with the frost, and then that's all she wrote, right? But they sat on these trees, these European pear trees, like this, for a week to 2.5 to 2 weeks, week and a half to 2 weeks. And this is what they look like today. So you can see the white down here. This will probably be maybe a full blossom by tomorrow, or maybe Saturday. Today is Thursday. Here's some other examples of the blossoms. Now, I don't know how the pollinators are going to feel about this tree. So we'll have to find out. I read that European pears don't excite them as much. They don't get as much pollen off of them, it's much food. And so European pears are kind of like not the first thing that bees want to go for, or the pollinators. But we're going to follow this through the whole year and find out. And I might have to thin this. These branches aren't really, you know, strong. So pears that get created on these are probably going to get picked off early. But I hope to leave some of these so I can get a good taste of this pear and give some feedback on it, so that maybe you can make a decision if you live in the northern climates where it's a little colder. Let's go look at the year. This will be the pollinating partner for that one. And the reason there's a fence here, by the way, is because I planted these last year before I had the deer fence up behind this big deer fence right here. This is the pollinating partner for the early gold. In fact, when you buy them from the local nurseries, they usually recommend that, hey, you want to pollinate it with the year. And so this is it. And then let's go take a look at one last tree before I sign off for today. This is the toka. It's a famous tree, especially for two things. One of them is pollinating. You can see all of the, I think those are all flowers. I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to see if there's white. I think there's white. Let me see if right around here. I think I see a little bit of white there. So I think these are flowers. But sometimes these pop out and they're just leaves. I'm like, so you decided not to be a flower? So I don't know. Maybe I still think these are flowers. Look at this. That's a flower. It's got to be a flower. So these are ready to put out some blossoms, and this has only been planted last year. So that's a pretty positive thing, I think. We're going to get some more tokas. Now, do you need to thin tokas? The thing about toka plums is they're pretty small. And so they're not going to weigh these branches down unless there's a lot of them. So I'll have to make a decision, like maybe I'll thin them down and not have very many on this particular tree, and maybe they won't even produce that much. Maybe the tree will do it itself. This is the black ice, and it's behind, as far as the leaves coming out, of the toka. The toka is the first one that is showing life, and this one's a little bit more like reserved, the black ice. And I don't know, will this one have, you know, some flowers on it or not? I don't know. This one is not a self-pollinating tree for sure. So you have to have a second tree to pollinate it, which is why they usually recommend the toka here for that purpose. The toka, I've read some places say it's not self-pollinating, but then I read others that say it is. So anyway, I'm not going to go into this anymore. I'll probably do some films tomorrow, but right now we're waiting for the trees to arrive. I think I have 3 more holes I can dig, and I can do some watering of the trees I've already planted. So for now, folks, thanks for tuning in. My Mountain Life. I will see you next time.